Today is January 7, 2023, and my friend Lindy is observing a birthday. I want to help her celebrate with a close look at a lovable, heartfelt composition from a perhaps unexpected quarter. As on occasions past, I'd like to share this with my YouTube audience and invite them to enjoy it and to join me in wishing Lindy a happy birthday. In 1899, working feverishly over the course of just 3 weeks, Austrian composer Arnold Schoenberg, then 24 years of age, completed his first major composition, a programmatic string sextet in late Romantic style responding to German poet Richard Dehmel's Verklärte Nacht, Transfigured Night. The string sextet genre had been pioneered over a century earlier by Luigi Boccherini, whose Opus 23, completed in 1776, consists of 9 such compositions. The Boccherini prototype, 2 violins, 2 violas, 2 cellos, was adopted by such later composers as Johannes Brahms, and that is the template that Arnold Schoenberg also used. Prior to 1899, string chamber groups such as quartets, quintets, and sextets were regarded as vehicles for absolute music, music innocent of any programmatic extra-musical leanings. Program music was primarily the domain of the symphony orchestra, which is capable of expressing an enormous range of situation and affect. But to place that kind of charge in the hands of just 6 players was an extraordinarily bold stroke. Unsurprisingly, the premiere of Verklärte Nacht was the occasion of much controversy, and public acceptance was fairly slow in coming. The poem itself proved problematic for many in prudish fin de siècle Vienna, and our look at the Schoenberg composition has to begin there. I'll present Dehmel's original text while reading Mary Whittall's English translation. I've presented the poem in such a way as to emphasize its construction in 5 stanzas of unequal length. This will become important as we follow Schoenberg's music, which tracks those 5 stanzas closely. 2 people are walking through a bare, cold wood. The moon keeps pace with them and draws their gaze. The moon moves along above tall oak trees. There is no wisp of cloud to obscure the radiance to which the black, jagged tips reach up. A woman's voice speaks. I am carrying a child, and not by you. I am walking here beside you in a state of sin. I have offended grievously against myself. I despaired of happiness, and yet I still felt a grievous longing for life's fullness, for a mother's joys and duties. And so I sinned, and so I yielded, shuddering my sex to the embrace of a stranger, and even thought myself blessed. Now life has taken its revenge, and I have met you. She walks on, stumbling. She looks up. The moon keeps pace. Her dark gaze drowns in light. A man's voice speaks. Do not let the child you have conceived be a burden on your soul. Look how brightly the universe shines. Splendor falls on everything around. You are voyaging with me on a cold sea, but there is the glow of an inner warmth from you in me, from me in you. That warmth will transfigure the stranger's child, and you will bear it me, begot by me. You have transfused me with splendor. You have made a child of me. He puts an arm about her strong hips. Their breath embraces in the air. 2 people walk on through the high, bright night. Schoenberg's musical response to that text takes the form of a large single-movement composition organized in 2 parts of roughly equal length. The first half of the work lies in the umbra of night, as much a dark night of the soul as mere absence of daylight, beginning in the gloom of D minor and finishing in E-flat minor misery and despair. That half of the work treats Dehmel's first 3 stanzas. The second half, set in D major, regards the final 2 stanzas. Here the night glistens, transformed by love. Shadowy leitmotifs heard earlier in Part 1 now return, cloaked in radiant hues. In terms of their structure, the two halves of this composition each address the expectations of sonata form, but in different ways, with the first half setting forth an exposition and development, and the second half then beginning anew, and this time completing the sonata pattern with a recapitulation. The whole is drawn together by those transfigured thematic returns. I've assigned descriptive names to a few of these themes: night, transfiguration, redemption, in order to express my understanding of the piece. In this connection, be sure to notice the theme I have identified as 1B during the first half. This tortured anguish theme will prove in some respects to be the most important of all, as it will both dominate the most tormented section of the development and undergo the most extensive transfiguration in Part 2. The climax of the piece is a new D-flat major theme that I've identified as redemption, occurring during the formal development of Part 2, and it's just breathtaking. There are, of course, other ways to analyze this composition than the way I've chosen, with one of the most promising possibilities being a thoroughgoing motivic analysis. Even without doing that, close attention to the many themes will make it clear that almost all of them are related somehow on the motivic level. I've only made mention of a couple of prominent ones in this treatment, including the three-note head motive of theme 2B, which I've dubbed a tritone motive. I've bracketed a few instances of that to show you how cleverly Schoenberg has pressed that little pattern into various service, including a gorgeous E major closing theme and the first part of the development to follow, which is absolutely saturated with it. I've mentioned several key centers so far, and I think it's time to say something about that. This composition explores a world of major and minor keys, some only briefly. All the key relations in this harmonically restless composition are affecting, especially in instances where the cadential phrase of one section resolves, or rather yields to, a completely unexpected key for the next section. This happens several times during Verklärte Nacht, none more arresting than that absolutely luminous moment not long after the beginning of Part 2, when already welcome and commodious D major yields to a twinkling expanse of F-sharp major musical starlight. I grope for words to describe this moment, and they all fail me. The musical craftsmanship throughout is just extraordinary, as even a casual look at the score will make immediately apparent. After all, it's Arnold Schoenberg. He claimed to have worked for 2 hours on the two measures 161 and 162 out of a 418 measure long composition that he knocked out in 3 weeks. On a personal note, I have to say that even if I didn't know the poem that inspired it, this is some of the most beautiful, poignant, and moving music that I know. And ever since I became fully aware of the poetry to which it responds, it's impossible for me to listen to it without shedding a few tears. It's an account of grace. Not the divinely conferred soul-saving grace that I was taught to beg for as a child and never experienced, but the grace that flesh and blood human beings can and do extend to each other. I have been the lucky recipient of such grace, and I'm grateful for it. In Schoenberg's time, it was fairly common for major works for small string ensembles, such as quartets, to be augmented for full orchestral strings, including the addition of basses. Schoenberg's older contemporary and countryman, Gustav Mahler, for instance, made string orchestra settings of some of Beethoven's late quartets, claiming that 4 players couldn't possibly realize the lofty musical conception in them fully. Schoenberg followed suit in 1917, making a string orchestra arrangement of Verklärte Nacht during a period of compositional dormancy while he was working out his dodecaphonic system. and he returned to that version in 1943 to make further improvements, including the marking of passages of primary and secondary importance with his by then customary Hauptstimme und Nebenstimme indications, rendered here as P and S, respectively. This is the version most often heard in performance nowadays, and it is the version you'll hear in this recording made by the Academy of St. Martin in the Fields under the podium guidance of Sir Neville Marriner. Happy birthday, Lindy. This isn't nearly enough, but it's what I've got.